What is the sound of one hand clapping? What is the sound of one fist punching? What is the sound of the IronCast? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz!
Yes, welcome to the first installment of the first season of IronCast, our show where we're going to review the Iron Fist series leading up to the big Defenders crossover. Okay, so Mozz, tonight's episode, Snow Gives Way. After being presumed dead, Danny Rand returns home to New York after 15 years, only to find things aren't as they were. Okay, so let's talk about...
Is this not, the Bruce Wayne story, at least in the Christopher Nolan universe?
Well, no, because they didn't drop Bruce Wayne in the Himalayas. He had to go there on his own. And actually, in all fairness, in the Chris Nolan universe, Bruce Wayne was a full-on adult before he started trying to become Batman. He was, if you remember from Dark Knight Rises, he was still played by what's his face, the Machinist,
Yeah.
And he goes, he's trying to shoot Don Falcone, and then he just wanders off to be homeless for a couple of years, and apparently it only takes a couple of years to be Batman. That's the good news.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. I just realized that right now. He was only gone for less than 10 years, and he comes back with nearly superhuman powers.
Yeah, well, that's because, it doesn't, apparently being Batman, not for nothing, Batman mostly beats up on crazy old guys. So, I mean, if we take Gotham as a starting point, man, he's like, 14 and they're all already in their 30s. So, it's like, by the time he actually becomes a superhero, these are like, 50, 60-year-old guys he's beating up every week, all with severe mental illness and goodness knows what else is wrong with them. So, yeah. So I just got to throw some shade at Batman. No, this is, see what this is. And okay, so let's talk about the giant white elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And no, I don't mean the fact that Finn Jones is white. I mean, there has been a lot of shade thrown at this series, and I'm going to be honest with you. Watching this first episode, I absolutely see why all that shade has been thrown.
You do?
I do, because here's the thing. And okay, so here's the crux of the biscuit with this series. They do some nice things. They do some really interesting things, especially with what I like to call the 12 Monkeys concept. If you've ever seen the film 12 Monkeys.
Yeah.
There's this quality of 12 Monkeys where you're almost not sure for a few moments there if Bruce Willis actually might just be insane. And his entire time travel premise is just his own mental illness. And I think they try to give you that here, but because it is a series that we know is a superhero series, we know he's not. So I think that immediately undermines that narrative conceit. And then you just have, just the fact that, not for nothing, he's got, as I've said on a couple of my other podcasts, he has a golden age origin. He is very much, and it's right to call out Batman, millionaire orphan studies and learns ancient secrets to be the master of something.
Right. And
yeah, it's very golden age. Now that doesn't mean it's bad, but it does mean that it is, it's sort of like the Superman films, the Man of Steel films, or even Superman Returns. Whereas it's this desire to make Superman, who is the quintessential Golden Age character, relevant in a modern structure, even though he is from a structure that is otherwise dated.
Right.
And here's what I'll say. There were some poor choices made by the director in how they cut, and maybe it's the director, maybe it's the editor, maybe it's the producer. Either way, I do feel there were some poor choices made that do not necessarily make this a bad show. But I can see why if you weren't geeked to watch this show, I can see how you might be like, oh, it's kind of middling. That's my take on it.
I know. I really enjoyed it. And the interesting thing was there was so much backlash against the show leading into it that I really didn't know what to expect. But I think one of the bigger problems that people had with it was the quote-unquote cultural appropriation. But here's the way I saw it. People expect things to be perfect immediately whenever some sort of change happening. And there's a lot of ground between where we are and where we should be. So I think people should understand that we will eventually get there slowly. But in the meantime, enjoy the things that are here and enjoy them for what they are. Well, don't for the art to reflect an ideal version of the world that doesn't exist yet. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, no, and I get that. And for what it's worth, Finn Jones kind of made a point on this, and I don't say anything to contradict it in this first episode I've seen. I've only seen half of the second episode yet. I haven't gotten much further. But, we're going to watch everything. I'm going to try and get ahead a bit before Friday when I talk about a little of this on superconnectivity. But, coming into this. So Danny Rand is a character. He's always a guy who is kind of separated from what everybody else observes. And one of the things I actually kind of loved in this, which actually was kind of neat, is, with the Big Al character. And man, spoilers, because I'm trying to remember where it all happens here, but spoilers, he dies in this episode. Yeah, he does die in this episode. And that was so disappointing. But I love it, because I really thought this was going to be like a great ongoing sidekicky character, Big Al. Yeah. But, I'm a hunter-gatherer, the way humans were meant to be, which I loved, but here's the thing, I love this scene where, him and Big Al are talking and all of a sudden Danny laughs and he says, what are you laughing at? He says, I just realized people see us and we look the same to them. You know? And it's, that could be insulting, but it's also just him saying, hey, you know what? We both see things other than the way the world sees it, Yeah. Now here's my big thing with Big Al is did he actually die of a heroin overdose or was he murdered? Because really we don't see anything from him in that first scene to suggest that he actually was a junkie.
That's true.
He seems almost like your prototypical semi-mentally ill hobo, just a guy who just can't handle society, but has found his way to survive, which, not for nothing, although drug abuse is very high among both the mentally ill and the, homeless community, there are, in fact, homeless people who just have just enough mental illness to, not want to live in society, but who can fend for themselves and just sort of get themselves through. It's sort of the idealized hobo, if you will. Right. And I wasn't sure we were going to get that here, which I'm sure would have caused all sorts of other complaints as well. So maybe having him die of a heroin overdose kind of brings home the truth of it to it all there. Now, yes.
If one hobo is approaching another, he's got to ask him about his preferences, or if he knows where to get her. I mean, I feel like that's the first thing one hobo would say to another, and he doesn't bring it up at all. So you're right; they don't point at all to him having a problem with heroin initially.
Exactly, and not for nothing, heroin is not necessarily, and of course I'm assuming it was heroin. He had a needle in his arm, but he could have been shooting speedball too, but nothing really speaks to speedball. But you're right; if he is a guy who has a massive drug addiction, I think you can even inject meth nowadays. I think there's an injectable form of meth that kids are using. But you're right. That might have been something a little more forefront in his character, and the fact that it wasn't kind of says maybe there is something there. And of course, we do see that he has this tattoo. Right, the eagle. Was it Shadow Hawk or Shadow Eagle? Yeah, which is the title of our second episode. So there may be something more to the Big Al story than we've seen. Right. Like I said, there's a couple of things in this where, the way that they did some of the cuts that I think, there are things that I think could very easily, if you wanted to have a negative view, could very easily pull you out. When I'm being honest, not the least of which is when he does the backflip over the car. It just seems so gratuitous. I mean, it's cool, but it's so nonchalant and gratuitous. It's like, it really takes you into, it's trying to force yourself into this fantasy world, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. And perhaps it's something that we have to do here, but I think they could have done better with a lighter touch.
That may be true. See, that was one of those things for me that was, just a glance and it was over, and it didn't register much with me as a good or bad thing. It was just something interesting that happened.
Yeah.
And, they say if he is, and I don't know much about the character very much at all. I'm coming to this completely blank. The sense I get is he, studied with monks and, they can do some sort of interesting things with chi and whatnot. So it didn't really bother me that much at all. Where I did think, and this is an interesting thing you are talking about, that you have to get into the reality of this world. Mm-hmm. And I think where they got me was where he walks into the lobby at first. He's got such a really bright sort of aura about him. He's just in wonder the whole time, right? He's got a big smile, and he walks in and, Joan doesn't work here anymore. And then he looks at the touch screen with all the stuff that his company's been doing, and he's just so enamored by it. And for some reason, right there, it was easy for me to start viewing the world through his eyes, where everything is a surprise, and what is he going to think of this? And that sort of allowed me to view that reality in a different way than I normally would.
Yeah. And what I really, so here I think is the real power of the Iron Fist story. Because there's this, and here's this thing, there's this concern about, with the Muddy Wuddy paradox, or the Muddy Wuddy trope, and the idea of a chosen one. It's important to remember Danny Rand isn't the chosen one. Danny Rand is a kid who studied and got good at something. It's not that he's the chosen one. It's that really anybody in the Marvel Universe can be really powerful, but you have to have the interest and the no other distraction to dedicate yourself to it. And I think one of the things that's interesting about Danny Rand is we see him in the opening here, which is one of the things that here's what I'll say. I think that Finn Jones and the writing is very strong in this. I think the acting and the characterization is really strong. Where I find myself being pulled out of it is with the direction and the pacing. I think that they're making some weird choices that make me go, is that really the right choice to make here? But
like
then,
what?
Well, like I said, so like just the way they have him moving about, just when they do certain cuts to his flashbacks, I kind of feel like they kind of pull you out there, and basically the excessive blue screeniness of the Himalayas is kind of bugging me. And then there's a weird thing for me because I kind of feel like there's not a consistent pronunciation of things in this show, where I think sometimes he's calling it Kunlun and sometimes it's calling it Kunlun.
Really? Interesting. I didn't catch that.
Yeah, well, and I might just be mishearing it. Maybe I only caught it because I have to be honest with you. I kind of watched this at 1 a.m. last night. But,
No, but I mean, if you're more familiar with the actual backstory and everything, I guess your mind would react to it. I wasn't familiar with it, so it just, you know.
Well, and again, it's not whether or not it's Kunlun or Kunlun. It's that it seems like he's pronounced it both ways.
Right. And that's the problem.
Yeah, and so those are little things that make me go, did they really, is the person helming this really controlling it well? Now, that said, I think Finn Jones gets a really great take on Iron Fist. Because what I always felt about Iron Fist, there's this great scene in Secret Wars 2, which is just going to do a little deep dive for you here. Basically, so for those who don't know, Power Man and Iron Fist, they eventually become best buddies. And,
Power Man
is Luke Cage. So Luke Cage and Danny Rand become the best friends ever. But they are very different people. And Luke Cage is very much he's very grounded in on the earth and very, very basic in his view of the world and his understanding of things because he's a guy who's lived through this. Danny Rand, by contrast, and this is the thing to understand about Danny Rand, he's a guy who first off was born into wealth and privilege. and then woke up one day in the mystical city of Kunlun, where, he was taught magic kung fu. I mean, you want to talk about a charmed existence. That's Danny Rand's life. Now, it's a charmed existence with great tragedy in it as well.
Right.
but it is this thing where, the level of microaggressions that Danny Rand has experienced in his life are probably relatively minor. He's had major upheavals.
Yeah, but would you take a life full of microaggressions to have your mom and dad back? I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, we can't say that it was,
No. But the point is to say you don't get that choice. You get you get the fact that he, Danny Rand, rather than, and for what it's worth, he did get microaggressions from his Ward Meacham, and actually not even microaggressions, just kind of him being a proto supervillain, which again is one of these things that I can see how that could really bother critics. The fact that they just went straight to supervillainy with the guy, it's like, rules are for losers kind of thing when they're playing Monopoly. And it's like, really, dude, that's you're going to be your character's defining moment here, and you get
I don't know, that really didn't even bother me as much either. I just felt like he was a bad, sort of hurt kid from the beginning, and we might get to the reasons why, or maybe not, but in essence, he's just a child. And I don't think, maybe I don't know enough of the characters to know, but he seems like an expendable character, one of those early villains that you waste to get to the person who's really going to be the villain. The person who I was really, really impressed with their acting was Joy.
Oh, man,
she's a great actress. It's better than what most everybody else was doing. I mean, the guy playing Ward, he's okay. I didn't really feel too much for him this way or that way, but Joy I was very intrigued by where her mind is going to go and what her character is going to do.
Well, what's great about Joy, of course, is that she is, and like I said, and I did watch the first part of the second episode, so I hope I'm not merging them too much. But what I think is, what is the great thing about Joy is, throughout the whole start of it, you're very much convinced she is, the sympathetic ear, the nice person, and then, have a glass of water, Danny.
No, but to some extent, maybe she is. And, certain part of, if you're a predator, there's certain things that are instinctual that you can't escape. But even within that, there's some room to at least entertain an idea. And I think she has that. When it came down to it, she had to do what she had to do because she's, a business person. She's a shark, she's got to do what she's got to do. But Mozz,
we're saying that she keeps drugged water in her office for just such an emergency.
No, but Ward walked in right afterwards, and it almost looked like it was a plan or that there was a contingency. He might have surprised her, but she decided, let's just go with that. So
yeah, I personally got the feeling that she is. I get the feeling that Joy is the real villain here.
Right.
I get the feeling she is the, it is a telling point that we saw her degree from Columbia. We did not see, Ward's, and I think that might be a statement too, that maybe, like I say, you never want to read too much into modern politics, but the idea that, Ivanka is the more respected heir. Well, I'm going to say, the heir to the Trump fortune who actually is on the ball. I think you might be getting something of that there, which one can argue as well comes from a certain misogynistic place to see the woman as by her nature in that negative light, but they certainly give us a great take on her here. And yeah, I think Joy as the villain of our piece is what we're going to be moving towards.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a negative thing. It's just power, and I don't think it's a sexist thing at all. I see it more as like a credit to her for being able to grab that power.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, one of the things I really liked here is that we are already getting a subtle interconnectivity between the Netflix shows. It's not heavy, although it's going to get more and more, but this clearly does deal with a lot of the land deals that were being discussed in both Daredevil Well, in the Daredevil series, because that's where we really got most of the land deal issues. But there's like conversations about a warehouse that they're buying up, which I think is supposed to be like one of the things that the Hand had bought, you know. And there is definitely something going on with Harold Meacham. Do we get his reveal in the first episode? Or is that second?
Yeah.
He is there in the first episode. Yeah, and you'll notice that he's got like a punching bag in his little hidden loft, and with his little curly-haired mousy assistant.
Yeah.
Who I just love in that. Who honestly, not for nothing, I am waiting for him to become not Ulysses, but there was this little curly-haired mousy guy who becomes an Inhuman in the comic books, who is like the one guy who can hide your actions from the peering eyes of other superhumans. So there's an intro. Yeah, there was an intro. It was in the Kingpin story, and I have no idea how it ended. I just, but I remember watching it as it started, and I'm thinking that was pretty cool. So, yeah, but it's all, you know, there's a lot good here. Like I said, I think the writing is really solid. I think the characterization is really good. Yeah. And like I said, I really think that Finn Jones does get, here's what I say, when he's just acting, I think he does a great Denny Rand. When they get into the Kung Fu, I don't know, I'm not feeling its choreography as well. Now, granted, well, you know, it's like, you know what it is, and here's the thing, and this is this problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you have Luke Cage jobbing people, right? It's just pure power move, you know. And what they're okay, so here's my comparison. When you would have a thing with Jackie Chan, and Jackie Chan's doing his moves, disarming the guy and doing all that kind of stuff, you know, and like you see Rumble in the Bronx, which is one of my favorite Jackie Chan's films. You know, he's making these moves, and there's this quickness and speed to it, and it never looks like anyone is playing. There's no kayfabe in that, you know. That is all. There is, I'm sure, but it just really looks like these are that you know. There's choreography, but the guys are totally, you know, when they hit, they're ready to hit, and you really feel that. And I don't feel, you know, perhaps because they went for an actor, not a kung fu fighter, but for obvious reasons, you know, that you don't get it as strong as it should be, you know.
I saw it completely differently. Okay. Like, to me, it really played really well, and it sort of spoke to the rhythm of the rest of the show, because they're taking their time with this. They're slowly, not given to... He didn't use, like, superpowers at all in the first episode, except for that one little jump. It was more about getting into the world and yada yada. But in the same way, when he's having that fight scene in the lobby and he's just like dancing around the guys and throwing them away, it reminded me of, if you've ever seen like two really good black belts roll in jiu-jitsu. This is how they move. It's not about aggression. It's not about, and it's just simply, it's almost like you know what the guy's going to do before you're going to do it, because you're that good, because you can judge every simple person's reactions or simple fighter's reactions, and he just moves around them. And they sort of focus a little bit on that too when he's in the crowd with all the celebrations, where the guy's right behind him, but he simply just shoulder checks him and does like a spin move around him, and he's gone. These are like subtle little movements that pickpockets or, you know, would use. Yeah. In that way, it felt very real, and it felt like he didn't want to hurt them. He was just moving them aside.
Yeah, and I will say this, the lobby scene I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, but I felt that, and I felt, so that's what I'll say, is I thought the lobby scene was great, but I felt that when you got to the later sort of Chinese New Year scene, or whatever that was supposed to be, it was a little more forced. And I liked Colleen Wing in this.
Yes.
You know, Colleen Wing is she's a very big part of this story, and I think she's going to be really awesome. You know, I'm really excited to see who we get in this. I mean, I was just running through the full casts, and I don't see Coulson anywhere, which is a little disappointing from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But we are going to get some familiar faces back. I mean, you know, some obvious other Netflix connective tissue. So this should all be very good. I mean, I have a lot of hopes for this. Because like I said, the things that are bugging me about the show are not the show itself. The things that are bugging me about the show are certain directorial choices and certain scene choices. You know, I mean, you know, there are aspects of it that I think are really great that I think, when you are outside of it, it's easy to see how that seems cliched, but I think that all in all, I think it has a definitely, and here's what I'll say. I'll definitely say the first episode was much stronger than the first half of the second episode, which is as far as I've gotten so far. The first episode I thought was really spot on. But like they say, there is going to be a slowness in that start because they do have to build this universe, and it's a pretty big, complex universe. We've got this whole financial power structure. A little disappointed though that we're not getting more shout outs here and there to the rest of the Marvel universe. There's no reference to Hammer as a partner with Rand Enterprises, or something like that. Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get that. But you always like to get those Easter eggs early,
Yeah.
But all in all, it was a really good show. I definitely, hey, I would definitely have watched it even if I wasn't podcasting about it. Now, if it wasn't a Marvel show, would I watch it? Probably still. But
yeah, I probably would.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have been compelled to watch it if it wasn't a Marvel show, but now that I've seen the first episode, I'm excited to see more.
Yeah, and I think this is going to go.
To your point about Colleen winning, another really, really fun scene between him and her when they go into the dojo, and again, it speaks to how everything is presented in that slow way, and they're letting you know how they're going to build the story. Because when he goes and says he wants to challenge the master, and she brings out that little wooden kendo stick, and she holds it right up to his face, and they get closer and closer, and they're like, "Okay, please leave," and I'm thinking, "Please fight." And it looked like they were going to do it, and then they back off, and they're like, okay, they're building something. And there was a real tension there that was palpable, and I was invested all the way right there.
Yeah. I mean, it's really great. I also, and again, like I said, I love the idea where he says you should teach Kung Fu. Again, suggesting that, Kung Fu is a real superpower in this universe. There's this is this thing I always say about comic books, is the two greatest superpowers are hypnotism and Kung Fu. Because you will see just complete losers who have mastered hypnotism or mastered Kung Fu, and they are complete, really scary characters, I mean, you think about like a guy like the Ringmaster in his, Circus of Crime, who hypnotizes the audience to have everyone go pick their pockets, because that's a business model. But, just this guy who's kind of a schlub supervillain, but the fact of the matter is, when you think about that ability to just instantaneously hypnotize thousands of people, Kilgrave isn't even that powerful until, like, the final 2 episodes.
Yeah.
So, it's pretty impressive stuff. And the fact is that anyone can master it.
It's completely democratic.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why they're the best superpowers. So, I did enjoy this. I really do like it. I am excited about the rest of the series. I do think it's probably going to have that slow build and slow burn, but I think much like Jessica Jones, which also had some real slow and completely pointless filler episodes, I think when we get to that end of the season, we're going to be like, whoa, that exploded. Okay, final thoughts on... Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, no, final thoughts, really. I mean, I don't get what I've only seen the first episode, but I don't get what all the hate is about. I really enjoyed it. I think it's its own thing, and you can call it cliche or you can call it staying in your lane. Like, Dude, Where's My Car is a cliche, but it's brilliant because it doesn't try to be anything other than what it is.
And that is a brilliant show, but the brilliant movie though. Dude, Where's My Car? One of the, honestly, that it surprised me that did not totally reinvigorate the stoner comedy as a concept, but because it was really good. But yeah, and to that extent, this is one of the things I've said about the entire phenomena of Iron Fist is that as a kung fu. That basically Luke Cage and Iron Fist came out at the same time. Luke Cage comes from the blaxploitation film craze, and was sort of Marvel capitalizing off that. And of course, Iron Fist and several other characters. There are actually a lot of characters who were the kung fu characters of the time, parlaying on the kung fu craze. The difference is that whereas blaxploitation had at its core this social relevance, kung fu films were just about kung fu. And if you just enjoy some really great kung fu, you know, the fact that, it's like, it's literally, I'm a superhero, here's a supervillain, I'm going to punch him now, and that can be a beautiful, brilliant thing. And I think that's what they're trying to do, but they are trying to ingratiate it into this much more complex and nuanced universe. It's sort of like, Captain America, when they integrated Captain America into, the more realistic Tony Stark Iron Man universe, the first one kind of came off as being a little cheesy, maybe a little hokey. But I think at the end of it, we can all say that Captain America wound up because he was the superhero in that complex world to be really the strongest entry in the Marvel dynamic. And I think that you have that potential here with Iron Fist.
Right. I
think he can very easily be the Captain America, where you're going to see, because he is this guy who does have a moral philosophy at his center. Right. He is the Zen monk at its center, and that he has to now deal with the world and superheroism. I think that gives you a bit of a deeper story.
Yeah. Now, why doesn't he change his clothes, though?
Well, apparently he only has one set of clothes, which is kind of weird. Do
you think he smells? Or?
I imagine he has got his sweating down pat, and he's probably a vegan. So, they always say they don't smell, but I
have vicious farts, though.
I would imagine so. I haven't spent that much time with too many vegans. Because I do like to hang around my own kind, and, we eat vegans in the form of cows. Because cows are vegans, and they get eaten. But, the thing is, yes, I imagine, I don't think he smells because he seems to have fairly good grooming overall.
That's a good point.
And we don't see him exerting himself.
So he's just a dirty hippie, not a dirty, smelly hippie.
I'm guessing he's not particularly foul-odored, although you can't smell through the TV. And that may be explaining why people are a little more... Well, here's the thing. I think if he smelled really bad, people would be a lot more negative towards him.
But would be alerted to his presence a lot quicker.
Yes. And so I think the smell is something that, it's like that. The whole point about being that total kung fu master is that you control your entire body.
Right.
Every cell of your body is in tune and in harmony. And we don't see him doing a lot of excessive sweating because he's not working out, it's like every movement is structured and set. And he can make that big leap, but then he's just going to walk. He's not going to leap and then run. Yeah, he's going to leap and then he's going to walk in. He's going to go where he's going. He's not trying to, burn himself out. So that would be my take on that he definitely is a less smelly hippie.
Yeah, it makes me feel better.
There we go. But yeah, he definitely does need a different outfit. If for nothing else, just because it's going to be pretty obvious, like that was the one thing he puts on the mask, but he's still wearing the same dirty poncho. It's like, hey, there's that guy in that dirty poncho. Although I think they did put a couple of hipsters in similar ponchos in that crowd scene. When I was watching it, okay, I see they put some other hipsters in the crowd scene.
Right.
Yeah, but and the fact that he doesn't wear shoes, that was actually one of those weird things I was wondering in this is like, what season is this taking place in? Is this like early spring? Is this summer? Is this fall? That no shoe thing, that I think that's going to catch up with him. Yeah. Okay, Mozz, I think we can both agree this is a good start for this series. We're going to watch this. And we're going to see where it goes, and I think we're all very excited. By the way, tonight's episode was directed by John Dahl and was written by... Let's see. I always put those comic book guys first in the writing credits on IMDb. Tonight's episode was written by Scott Buck and Dwayne Worrell as our staff writer. Okay. Yes. So, Mozz, how can people reach out to you if they want to talk to you about this?
They can find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor or email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
Awesome. And of course, you can always write to me that old-fashioned email way at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter as I live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Powerless, Legends of Tomorrow, The Incredible Hulk, 7 o'clock on Saturdays on MeTV, @Charlie Esser, that's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's right there in the middle for the quality. Thank you, students, for joining us tonight for a wonderful episode of the of the IronCast. And remember, the path of Kung Fu is not a path to a door, but a road leading forever into the horizon. Ooh. Contemplate upon this wisdom now. Good night, everybody.